Welcome everybody and welcome Mandip Singh Soin, and he's a son of the Himalayas regardless of the borders, and he has been doing great things, great programs and great exploring and great mountaineering, and he's an environmentalist also. So we have him today in between us with us to share his story of his explorations as a mountaineer, explorer and environmentalist. And it all concerns all of us and it is connected with all of us because we are also the resident of the Himalayas and we are also working in bigger tourism. So I would like to give a small introduction of Mandip Singh Soin. Many people may like to know. Mandip Singh Soin, he has written FRGS, means Fellow of Royal Geographical Society. He is an explorer, mountaineer, environmentalist, adventure travel and ecotourism professional. Mandip Singh Soin is the founder and managing director of IBEX Expedition. His operator's name, company name, or all these adventure activities and mountaineering, environment activities, he does through his base. The base name is IBEX Expedition, which is his company, established in 1979 and amongst India's early adventure and luxury travel companies. His company, IBEX Expedition, has been recognized with several national and international awards, as well as been rated by National Geographic as one of the best adventure travel companies on earth. That's very nice. In the last 40 years, Mandip has traveled across 7 continents, undertaking expeditions, climbing, hiking, skiing, and exploring. This has earned him international awards, and he is the only Indian to receive the NES Award from the Royal Geographical Society, UK, and Citation of Merit from the Explorers Club, USA. A fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, Mandip is also the recipient of the highest civilian award in India for adventure by the President of India, called the Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award for lifetime achievement. Congratulations, Mandip. He is also the honorary founder and president of the Responsible Tourism Society of India, and he is a board member of the Global Adventure Travel Conservation Fund. He is also a member of the CII, Confederation of Industrials National Tourism Committee, and serves on the National Board of Sustainable Tourism and Adventure Tourism. Mandip loves gentle, pastoral symphony of Beethoven as well as the vibrance of Pavarotti. He flips omelets to perfection for relaxation, indulges in the occasional bungee, and can escape into Bhangra at instant demand. Okay, congratulations, Mandip. You have got a very, wide variety of passions and pursuits. Thank you.
Through a small journey of several years, which is basically starting as a school kid. If we could just dim the lights a wee bit, I think we might get a better sense there. So, if you go as a kid with beautiful mountains like Trishul or the Himalayan peaks, or you see the Edelweiss, I think you get a bit hooked. And I guess I grew up on a staple diet of books like these, inspiring climbers like Bonington and Hillary and Maurice Herzog. Some of them were our school books. And I went off for a small trek, and these were my sort of mentors. As was mentioned, Hari Dang was my school principal, who was an Everest. Mr. Gibson, Shomi Das, they were from Mayo College. And they had brought in the traditions of going and doing a lot in the outdoors. And not just going and doing stuff, but also respecting the outdoors. So all those things were really ingrained, and something like this was very important to understand from a person like Edmund Hillary. Having gone to college, of course, hoping to, what your parents would tell you at that time was to join the civil service, but it was also a place where there was very active hiking and mountaineering. So following that tradition, we did this 500-kilometer trek, lost a mule to a snow leopard, and we were very lucky at that time to convince the government of India that students who are really keen can be appointed as liaison officers and not just army or air force or naval officers. So we had a breakthrough, and that was my first trip into the Nanda Devi sanctuary with an American expedition. Sadly for me, of course, it ended up in a disaster because the people they climbed from here, one of the members was here, the wife of one of the husbands, four of them went up here, and then unfortunately on the way back, they slipped to their death. And that was not a great beginning. And the people who actually helped them were two-star British climbers called Peter Bodman and Joe Tasker, who were climbing at a nearby point. Getting a little exposure to the different countries. This is a Brit gang that came from Merseyside. They were so eccentric, like every general Brit should be. They would sit at base camp and wear their bow ties for dinner. We went off to the Andaman Islands, and for me, it was not just a case of mountains only. It was a sense of adventure, whatever the medium. And here we studied the tribes, we did some deep sea fishing, and unfortunately for our government, we also wrote a critique because we found that they weren't very sensitive to the tribal communities here. And hopefully that got some action. During college, of course, it was good to explore rock climbing in and around Delhi. We have the Aravalli Mountains, which are actually older than the Himalayas, many of us would know. And this is right there within Delhi and within the distance of about 30 kilometers. And today, we are happy to say we have a nice rock climbing guidebook. And of course, many years later, I was ended up as the manager of the first Indian team for a World Cup, which is now very popular in South Asia, thankfully. And I'm actually staying at a place, a Nepali Ghar, which has a climbing wall at your setup, Dava. So this was again my last trip into the Nanda Devi. One of the lucky things was that I took a photograph, it became a postage stamp. And then we also went with these Brits who I realized were doing some crazy kind of climbing techniques I'm talking of 70s. And I wanted to really learn all this because neither did we have the equipment, nor did we have the ability to do these, front pointing and lead climbing, etc., and all that. So I decided that after my master's in history, much to the disappointment of my parents, I said, let me take a year off and travel and climb and ski and learn and see what the other side of the world has to offer. And in those days, unfortunately, you couldn't get more than $500 as your foreign exchange. So the challenge was to live within that. And of course, people like Mark Twain had a great impact. And as you can read this, which says, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do. So throw off the bar lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. And I guess, using that as my lodestone, I ended up in starting with Italy. And there's some Langlauf skiing, some climbing in the Alps, and changed my turban to a woolly hat. And there we were traversing Matterhorn and some of the well-known areas of the Dolomiti. And this was interesting because I realized that there weren't many Indian ascents over here. So I rapidly did some rock climbing training. And of course, in many cases, a lot of friends helped out because, we were on a shoestring budget and we had to try every possibility of making sure that you were sort of, living within a budget. So what I'd done is that I was learning some extreme rock climbing here. And one of my goals was to do this route called the Route Astronauti on Torre di Prati. And the deal was that I would make this outhouse in the evening, and the guide, whose charges were roughly in those days about $50 a day, which I would have bust my budget in a few days. He said, well, you can build this, and on the mornings I'll give you guiding lessons. Now this was to be a week. I finished in 5 days, so I had 2 days. I still had to climb this, and I realized that you've got to think of your feet sometime. So I told him that, okay, in that case I can't give you money, but every guest that comes to your guest house, that evening I will put up my scarf in front and I'll become the Indian palmist. And I'll read the hand, and whatever money I get in my scarf is your fee. And that's how I managed to do Route Astronauti. So anyway, that's Bavarian Alps, Engadine Valley in the Swiss Alps. And then, of course, there was this wonderful thing that had started with the hang gliding. This is over Chamonix. And then I ended up becoming an instructor in one of their national schools in Wales called Brennan, which was great fun because you could learn a lot of new techniques and do some extreme rock climbing like over the sea cliffs. And in fact, here's where I learned that one should really change the turban to a helmet. And I did that in my later years. And again, the learning here was really the trick is not to rid your stomach of butterflies, but to make them fly in formation. And I think that holds a lot for people who do adventure, and you can apply it to life as well. I went off to Scotland to learn some Langlof skiing and ended up working in the Lochiel Outward Bound School. And there was another incident where, through friends, of course, I reached the principal's office and I was applying for a job. In those days, not many Sikhs were walking into jobs for an outdoor instructor. And he looked at me and he said, "You're obviously from India." And I said, "Yes." He says, "Do you believe in the Yeti?" Because Himalaya was all the same for him. And I said, "Well, I think it doesn't really exist. And but there've been expeditions and so on and so forth." But he said, "So we might have a problem giving you a job." I said, "Oh, why?" And he said, "Because right here," which was in Scotland, "we believe in the Loch Ness monster, and we'd like you to continue that sort of legend and all that." So I quickly scratched my head and I said, "I think there might be a Yeti," and I got my job. So that's doing some extreme ice climbing, which I was fortunate to train on. And this is one of the routes that Chris Bonington and Hamish McInnes had done on something called Buccleuch Moor. So many years later, some rafting on what they call is the water of the Dee or whatever, or the Spey, which is Scotch colored or something. Anyhow, at that point, I guess this was the time I had to decide whether I go back and join the civil service or whether I continue with adventure, which was really my passion. And we thought we'll start an adventure travel company and be involved in that whole story. And as I say to friends, I think though it was a Robert Frost moment for me, the only situation I felt was a very frosty look from my parents, of course, about the decision. But that was going to be our playground, and soon it started off. But much of the well-planned and well-laid plans, what you have in mind, often obviously don't go as you want. And this was a big tragedy for me because having come back to India after having done all these, amazing climbs, which I thought I'd managed to do and learned all the techniques, we tried an alpine-style ascent in India, and very sadly, we lost a friend in a crevasse. And that was such a sort of a mid-stopper, as it were. And it really made me think that, do I really need to, be involved in this? And there was a lot of pressure. But then I did say to myself, let me take one more expedition. Let me get things sorted out. And despite all whatever we had done, we could never pull him out. Despite all choppers that came and the rescue system, there was lack of communication. Anyhow, I came to the Nunkun area in Zanskar and we made our first ascent of Z1. And that's when I really, like Lynn Cox says, when you go on expedition, you undertake two journeys. And the inner one taught me that, we can't really back up now and run away from situations, but you've got to confront them. So this is climbing Z1. We were lucky to make the first ascent in Zanskar and with the Japanese and learning how to eat good miso soups and happy to be on a summit. Sometime later, it was my first 7,000 meter peak called Kun, and looking into the many, many unclimbed peaks there. Rafting in the Rogue was fun, and we started doing rafting on the Zanskar River, which is India's Grand Canyon. And we did it for companies like Sobek, which would be well known here. Z3 is the mountain and that's the kind of terrain that you jeep across, which is fun in Zanskar and Ladakh. Quite iconic. Even now, this is a few years ago, that you can have happy interactions with the monks and all the training that happens in the sort of monasteries there with the ladies in their finery of Zanskar. And it's still quite a pretty place and one of our better rivers to raft down. It's a 5-day river expedition with some spectacular views and some fabulous grade 5 rapids as well. So back in 81, we used to also do this trip from Delhi to Kathmandu. on bicycle, where we used to train the Tour de France people. And I did this for the first time, having never ridden a bicycle in my life before, but it was great fun. And I remember places like Butwal, Waling, and Pokhara, and then up to Kathmandu, of course. And more recently, I've enjoyed doing this wonderful thing, which I'm hoping I can do it again in Pokhara in a few days' time. And that's pretty much what we do now in India because of the traffic conditions from Delhi to Kathmandu. Um, Around 84, we also found that nobody had done a rock climbing expedition all over the country in India. So we decided to do one in around Mumbai, around Bangalore, and we made this first ascent of a face where we also got benighted for the night. So we were strung across, but we managed to climb. And around that time, we also figured out that given the geographical diversity that we have in India, there hadn't been a crossing of the Thar Desert north to south. So we decided to ride camels for 450 kilometers and made this crossing until the border of Gujarat, which was slightly painful on the bum, as they say, but we survived. And now, of course, you can do it in a more deluxe way, as is in tourism. Around then, there was a mountain called Meru, which I don't know if many of you have come across a movie called Meru, which is a great ascent by an American climber, which has done this shark's fin. This is the iconic thing. We did this north route, and that was the first Indian ascent. But we had to train really hard because the point we were trying to make was that it's important to go technical and it's important to climb harder routes rather than just take the normal routes up mountains. And we came to climb and train in France, in Chamonix again. And then, of course, we got to this beautiful area of the Gangotri Valley, which is, of course, getting affected by climate change and glacier recession. But these were the four, three Indians, one Swede, and there was no tents, no porters, no guides. We were bivouacking, and it was a nice mixed ground between rock and snow and ice. And last day we couldn't reach the summit, so we made an emergency bivouac, told a lot of bad jokes, kept awake, and then the next morning we could reach the summit, and that's Meru. So I have a small 2-minute clip out of a 24-minute movie that was made for the Indian and Swedish television at that time. And so let's see if we can get that going. And this, of course, is just a couple of shots of what is happening in the Indian climbing scene now with the similar mountains of that is actually Conrad Anker on Meru out of the film, and that is Shivling, the slide you saw before. So, and for some of you who might be cricket buffs, one of the climbing buddies is Charu Sharma, who's actually a sports commentator and often talks on cricket. So my knowledge on cricket actually comes from him. So having gone through that trauma of the loss of a friend, and knowing that in India we actually didn't have much of a rescue system, we applied for an INLACS grant, which is the Indian equivalent of the Rhodes Scholarship. And we got a grant to train in mountain rescue in the UK. So we worked with the RAF, and we worked with the Glenmore Lodge in Scotland, and we also studied the system in Europe, in France, because there is the paid system backed by insurance, and in UK it is mainly a voluntary system. So we came and sort of brought some of that stuff back, which got into our institutes on training for search and rescue, and then we trained the local people on how important it is to not just have dependence on helicopter rescues, but also have our land rescue built up through local community help and first aid and so on. And Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the ambassador there in Delhi, became the patron of this project. Soon I was called for an expedition into the Arctic by Robert Swan on an international expedition, and I'm so delighted to learn that one of our friends here has actually been on the Antarctic expedition of Robert Swan's. And this is the time where we had a lot of people who were supporting the project, and Prince Philip became one of our patrons as one of the supporters of this trip. And I took the youngest Indian boy because it was an international students expedition, and the whole idea was to make a kind of a high altitude or a classroom in the Arctic. and to understand what is going on with the environment over there vis-a-vis the ozone hole. You also had a lot of fun, like building your own igloos and having a little bit of adventure. But the main thing was to study and do the snow sampling, look at the ozone hole, supported by the scientists of America and Canada. But the big thing was that even as we let these ozone balloons up and we realized that there's a big ozone hole and so on, these are global environment problems. And so, what were 25 students and 6 instructors going to do about it? But the big learning was that each one of us, no matter where we are in life, can make a difference. And for me, I took an earth pledge, and that was what was the turning point to say that let me do what I can in my personal life and in my work life to do the right stuff for the environment. And I think it's been a gratifying journey. Around that time, there was the Himalayan Environment Trust that came out with some very simple guidelines for Himalayan, trekking or being in the outdoors, whether it's a case of just going 100 meters or 100 feet away and camping from freshwater sources. These are simple things, but we need to transmit this to hundreds and thousands of people to get back your garbage, not biodegradable. We have to have some, obviously, carrot and stick issues on these with regulations. For the 40 years that we've operated, we've never allowed a single campfire in our Himalayan treks. And a lot of people said, I'm sure you have enough, Sikh jokes that you've heard of, right? And they say, Sardarji, this is a crazy joke you put on yourself. I said, no, I'm going to stay my course. And once we explained to the customers why we were doing this, there was a greater following. And that's what we want to tell people, that when you do the right thing, I think you get a greater following. And so we then knew that it wasn't just going to be good for yourself, but you needed to expand it to the industry. So that's the first time under PATA that we got the industry to sign a pledge to do the right thing. 1990 saw us doing an elephant expedition because nobody had done it in India before. So we walked 101 kilometers on elephant back. We thought it'll be easier than camels, but before you ride one again, let me tell you, it's as painful as the camel. So be wary. Sikkim, another super spot where we used to do a lot of learning expedition with students, because it was all about using the outdoors and learning, whether it was hydrology or botany or art and so on. And this is, of course, going close to a mountain you're all familiar with, the Kanchenjunga. I found myself in New Zealand around then, and I thought I should give a shot to bungee because it had just started, and it was great fun. And the next morning, of course, they issued this wonderful certificate, which is a great sense of humor that they display, that you were basically in a disturbed moment. And I was completely out of my mind to attach myself to a ludicrously large rubber band. And I thought it was a nice finish. But what was really fun was a tandem skydive. And this was the first time I'd done both these activities. So I was reasonably, chuffed. And I called up my wife in India. I said, Anita, I did a bungee in the morning and I did a skydive in the evening, or the other way around. And there was suddenly a sort of a silence on the phone. And she said, I would have killed you if you hadn't survived. So I said, oh, thank you. So that was that. Then Jeep safaris, Tabo Monastery, the Menelian. You were always lucky to meet the Dalai Lama and seek his blessings. And that's going into Ladakh. These are one of our big sort of Jeep safari areas with the Thiksem Monastery. And the same river that we were talking of, which you were rafting down, used to be a river that used to freeze in winter every year. But we found that there were several people and photographers, and there was a tradition of people walking for 7 days through the gorge to come out to the other side and go to school. That was amazing. So we said, now what if we can make this as a commercial venture? And this would open the doors to winter tourism. And so this is a big project with the Indo-British expedition that I got. We got the Explorers Club behind us. Lord Hunt was our patron, and we launched an expedition which basically walked from the source to the finish of this river. So I think I've, oops. I have a feeling that the battery is run out of this pointer. So let me see if I can do it this way. Yeah. So this is the sort of motley crowd, as you can see. Charu and myself are the Indians, and the rest are on the right hand side is also the second person to the right. Many people might remember a brand called Carrymore from the British industries, and he's the founder of that. And we had skiers and so on. Anyway, there was a lot of hoopla. We got a helicopter by the Indian government. They helicoptered us into Zanskar, and then we walked out. And I nearly lost this ride because I'm given to a little bit of wordplay sometimes. Can't help it because I'm a Sikh. And if you're a Sikh, you are allowed puns. You know why? Because I come from land of Punjab. So anyway, I met this general who was in charge of the army, and he sort of got up in his full thing with a large handle bar mustache and all, and he says, "I'm General Narenjan Prasad." And I put my hand out and I said, "I'm specific Mandip Singh." So he wasn't very impressed, but he gave us a helicopter ride anyway. That's Zanskar, the homes. So the idea was to make it as a very nice ecotourism product where people would stay in the homes and also do a winter guiding and use of porterage, etc. So it was going to be a win-win for everyone. And that's the kind of stuff you can see through the gorge. And naturally, as you can imagine, being so beautiful, most of the people do this and say they really went on a gorgeous trip. Anyway, like with this walk, sometimes your sense of humor also freezes up a little bit. And I have to admit here, one of my Brit friends tried to pull my leg a little bit, and he said, there was a section where we had to wade because the ice and snow had melted. So we took off our boots and we waded through, and obviously you get a bit lacerated and the feet don't look pretty. So he got at the other end and he said, "Mandip, do your feet hurt?" I said, "Mike," and I thought I should do a stiff upper lip back at him. I said, "Mike, feet don't matter to us in India. We changed to the metric system." So that was that. Anyway, that's at the end of the river. All happy that we made it. And of course, we try to climb a trekking peak called Stoke Kangri in winter, which we didn't succeed. But that essentially opened winter tourism in the country. Fishing is also a great opportunity. We've been doing some of that. And then I got an invite to a very interesting expedition in the Year of the Mountains to Switzerland, which was basically to climb with the Pakistanis as a sign of friendship, and also to try and see whether we could, like they did over here, which is the Aletsch Glacier, they declared it into a World Heritage Site. Because believe it or not, we always think of Switzerland as being the acme of tourism, but guess what? They also suffer from over-tourism in some areas. So when you go to the Aletsch Glacier, you cannot have a moment of total peace if you wanted to, because there's helicopter tourism going around. So by declaring that, they were able to stop helicopter tourism in the World Heritage Zone. And our idea was that if we can come and declare Siachen Glacier, which is in between India and Pakistan, as a zone of peace, then it's a great thing to aspire for. And so there were two people from Pakistan, well-known climber called Nazir Sabir, who was their president of the Alpine Club, Colonel Sher Khan, and there was myself and Harish Kapadia from India. And of course, oftentimes we used to joke with them. We got on like a house on fire with the Pakistani climbers, And this is actually a beer which Harish was having. He took a nap, and Sher Khan took it away, and we always pulled his leg. We said, "You guys are always taking things don't belong to you from India, isn't it?" So here's where we had a great bonding. And in fact, I was surprised that one of the Pakistani friends came up with this Sikh joke at me. And, everything was going hunky-dory and all that. And he said, "Have you heard the Sikh joke about the people who went to see the movies?" So I said, "No, tell me." So he said, "Why did 19 Sikhs go to see the movies?" So I said, "Aap batao." So he said, "Because poster mein likha tha that under 18 not allowed." I said, "My God, now I've got to give him back, So I said, "Oh, so Nazir, tell me, have you heard of the RAF pilot that came to train your Air Force?" So he says, "No." So I said, "Well, he came and he takes the Pakistani pilot up and he tells them how to do the inside loop, the outside loop, the banking, the strafing and everything. And then he says, 'Okay, matey, I'm done. I'm off. See you later.' And he says, 'Yeah, but you haven't taught us how to land.' He says, 'No, the Indians will take care of that.'" So, some healthy sort of jousting there. Also on this expedition, very strategically, we had a British climber who, if you look carefully, has no arms and no legs. These are artificial. And that is just to make a point that actually, as we all often say, nothing is impossible. And he climbed every summit that we climbed. And his name is Jamie Andrews. So those are all the sort of supporting organizations. We did a few peaks. Adolf Augie, who was the president of Switzerland earlier, became our chief patron, and he pushed the whole idea. And we spoke at the UN. And basically, it's still work in progress. Some of these things in life take a very long time, but it's very important to go on that road. Otherwise, like they say in the good old saying of, I think it's a Chinese saying, that the 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step. So we've got to embark on it if we want to really arrive at some conclusion. So this is the Siachen. I have to say that at least whilst the armies have not disengaged, there has been a substantial environmental look-in and best practices brought in as much as they can, because look at the nonsense that goes on in all the physical dumping that happens. 2002 was also a year for ecotourism, and we did a volcano expedition. We did a mapping of what type of tourism must happen in these fragile areas. We climbed the volcano, the only volcano we have in India, and then we submitted a report to the Ministry of Tourism to not actually open the area of Nicobar, which is south of Andamans, because until you don't get tourism right on the Andamans, there's no sense in opening it. And again, it was a case of how we deal with tribes and so on. Around that time, of course, we also used to have a lot of seminars on environment, and people like Reinhold Messner were great supports. And we formed our own sort of experimental ideas with, this was in the southern state of Kerala, where essentially they converted poachers into guides. And this model is being used a lot around the world. And we actually saw that this is like what the tagline used to be, from zero to hero. And this is something which is worth thinking about, that why do we need to marginalize communities? And if there is a problem, let us see how tourism can try and come in and fix it. So this was Nagaland, similar story, where we had hunting as part of the culture. And they were hunting some of the best Tragopan pheasants and some of the Blythe pheasants, which is a dream for the bird watchers. So we went, took an NGO, they trained the villagers and the hunters for 1 year. And today they are earning more money through bird watching than they were. And they can buy chicken from the market for their table rather than getting those, precious birds for the table. Of course, they had some pretty interesting food habits. This is maggots, which they eat. But then I realized when I was sitting at the Explorers Club, it wasn't too different when they were eating baby alligators, which is, of course, a fabulous dinner that happens if any of you ever get a chance in the US. It's an annual event, and it's, you get all sorts of inspirational people. This is with Buzz Aldrin at that point. Bhutan was, of course, great. My dad had been posted there at the time of the current king's grandfather, actually. So I've been very partial to all the Indo-Bhutan societies, and we did this Drukpath trek some years ago, and I was happy to see it being really kept in a very pristine situation. Borneo, sometime later, we wanted to climb Kinabalu Peak. Again, interesting to see how people commercialize certain ascents, but so long as you can do it with a low footprint, I think that seems to be the guiding force. Again, just to make a point, when we travel to any other country or within our country, if we see that there is something to be highlighted, we try and take steps. This is, of course, some of the beautiful forests of Borneo. And as you all probably know, they are being lost to palm plantations. And because of that, we took a day out and just did a lot of tree planting, just to make a point and sensitize our industry. Back in India, we've been trying to do, I don't know if you've heard of the Chambal River in India, in central India, where we had this famous dacoit, the Chambal Queen was a movie made, and so on. So we went with the government, and these are the actual real dacoits that we saw on the side. And we've been speaking to these communities, and we've had 2 river expeditions, And very soon we want to bring tourism to them because the river itself is a biodiversity hotspot. And we hope to make it a World Heritage Site one day. Tibet was 2007, going through all the stuff which is your backyard really, and you know most of it, the Dolmala Pass and the Everest North Face. Now, curiously, we went to this place and we were a little disappointed because in those days I was serving on the UIA board on one of the commissions, and we were very disappointed to see that the Chinese had actually put a road through to the base camp, which is such a pristine area from Rongbuk to the base camp. You would ideally have left it as wilderness. So we appealed to them, and we made some things in the press and so on. But what was an interesting reaction was, and we did it as gently and as culturally sensitive as you can be in these kind of situations. But they said, they wrote back and they wrote to my commission chairperson, who was a British at that time. And he said, you know, guys, you did a tunnel right through Mont Blanc. So why are you giving us this gyan now? And that was an interesting feedback, not just to say that just because somebody may have committed a wrong because they didn't know any better, but if we now know any little bit better, then perhaps we need to do corrective action. So these wilderness places, if we can preserve and have less man-made incursions, I think that is important for the human soul and tomorrow's tourism. Because the more we build infrastructure, the worse it gets from our pure wilderness. And people are actually, there's a movement abroad called rewilding, and that goes against and stuff. So therefore, I think as we are all a global community, what we do one part of the world often is seen by many other parts of the world. So it's good to try and do the right action. Lucky to be at the 150 years of the Alpine Club, where I've been a member for a long time, and catch up with some good friends. And apart from beer drinking, that's Walter Bonatti and Stephen Venables. We had to do some climbing as well. So with my good old friend Charu, we were doing some rock climbing here on the Riffelhorn. And there we are, reasonably happy to have got up. And of course, it's a different world. As you all know, you can wear your turban or your tie and suit and walk out and climb a peak because the, metros or the trains are going pretty close to the summits. But it's a different lot of fun, isn't it? This is some fly fishing that we did. My daughter was studying in the US, so we gave her a present after she graduated. Nothing fancy, but just a day outing of fly fishing. Rock climbing in the Colorado region. And then it's around that time that the government asked us to make a national body for looking at ecotourism, for looking at environmentally sensitive actions. So we got together and we called people from different walks of life, and we made the national body called the Ecotourism Society of India. And we held a lot of workshops over the last 10 or 15 years. We published many publications and booklets, and also did a trip into Arunachal, which was, of course, the Tawang Monastery, and made sure we hung this flag so that we don't have any issues about where it belongs. And there's a lovely river there as well called the Siang, which you can raft down. And this is a new area of Arunachal, which is just opened, called the Mechuka, which is on the border of China. Mongolia is another great destination for people who ever dream of going. We've done it through camelback, through walking, hiking, try to look like nomads and try all the Genghis Khan stuff. And of course, around this time, I started getting worried because my wife, Anita, was getting a bit affected by the kind of hat wear she was choosing. So we decided to close the expedition and run away. We went off to Madagascar next, and this was the local pirogues. So we did 3 days on this river journey, beautiful sunsets and staggering sort of rock formation. This is a World Heritage Site, and the French have actually made a rope system there, and the lemurs, the chameleons, the upside down trees called the baobabs, and of course we hired a dhow to replicate on what the explorers used to do in the early days when they came from the Arab land to Africa, and that was great fun to be able to camp in various places. And that's when Anita threw us off again. So I thought we should close that expedition. And we buzzed off to Peru the next year. Great trekking there, beautiful culture, as we all know, superb rivers to raft, and a very well regulated industry. One of the countries we could study as how industry works on regulating tourism and carrying capacity issues and so on. Beautiful. That's Machu Picchu, well respected shrine. Never can you ever go there with one extra person on that day. If the cap is X amount of people, you cannot exceed by one person. You are not allowed to go to the bathroom when you go in there because it's a sacred site. So everything is done before you walk in. If there's an emergency, you have to get out. There's no going around a pillar and doing all that nonsense. So it's a good learning. Morocco was another great fun country to look at. Fez, and this time I was genuinely happy that Anita bought a decent hat. So we continued the expedition and went off to the Atlas Mountains. And then we extended on to the Sahara, do some camel riding and look at the wonderful Hogar. And around that time, I was involved with judging these tourism awards worldwide. And what was very interesting was that here the learning was that globally, there are so many companies that are doing some amazing stuff. But can we get all those good practices becoming our standard, not just the top 5 or 10%? And I think that is a big challenge for our travel industry. I was invited at the 150th year at the Swiss Alpine Club, and we were looking at the future of the Himalaya or future of the Alps in terms of tourism pressures. And I think these are things that we all need to now sit together as not just industries, but as nations, because if we don't take stock now, we have the terrier of over tourism snipping at our heels, and very soon it could become unfortunate reality. So you don't want to go there. Look at Namibia. Namibia was another fantastic example of using superb architecture for their lodges. This is another area that I bemoan, that in India, Nepal, Pakistan, a lot of our countries, we are so obsessed with development and so obsessed with quick development that we often lose the sense of our architectural well-being. Our vernacular architecture doesn't get counted. So here was another interesting safari that we did where you could do a walking safari for the rhinos, and some fascinating landscapes. It's Big Daddy Sand Dune, which they call, is the second highest. It's a great walk up on this dune. Chile is another very, very well regulated and amazingly diverse country. On the north part, as you all know, it's a very thin sliver along the side of South America. And the top end is very similar to, I would say, something like the Ladakh and Mustang kind of topography. In the middle, you have what they call the Lake District with fabulous rafting. And right at the end is Patagonia, where you have all the great mountains. We chose specifically to stay at this eco camp in Patagonia because they really walk the talk. It's 100% eco. They do composting, and it tells you that even in harsh conditions, you can actually bring environmental best practices. And there's no, saying that you're in a harsh climate or whatever. And then, of course, you walk to these wonderful Torres del Paine and my friend Charu again. Fly fishing, again, they've taken it to the next level. We've been fly fishing all over the world, but in Chile, if you go, you can only fly fish with barbless hooks. So that even gives a greater chance to the fish to escape and not hurt them as bad as hooks. Of course, you can always say that why do you fish for starters? But that's going too puritanical. But these are good practices that you can bring about, and that's just a brown trout. And here we were lucky to hear the president of Chile, who, in response to Mr. Tompkins, who many of us will remember is the founder of North Face and stuff like that, he gave away a few million hectares of land to the government of Chile. And in his memory, who unfortunately died now, they designated a large chunk of the ocean next door to make it into a national park. And that was a wonderful thing that happened. And, some great learnings from a man like him. And I can only say, a lot of you must be aware that the founder of Patagonia only recently gave up his entire $3 billion to a charity. And he has walked out And he said that whatever money is generated, it's going to run as a commercial operation, but every bit of it will go towards climate change and so on. Of course, sadly, we saw Anita doing funny things on the hat, so we had to go running far away into the Trans-Siberia next. And this is another amazing journey you can do into the Siberian area, where there are old believers who rebelled against the Russian government, if you please, and walked those 1,000 kilometers to set up shop in Siberia. Fascinating stories. And it's places like this when you go and you realize what a wonderful planet we live in. And if you've got the opportunity to travel, why not? And as the young lady was telling me, that's our son who took part in Robert Sohn's 2041 project of the Antarctica. So when we went there, and for me, I think this is the last great wilderness on our planet. And if we can save this, and the whole idea is that in 2041, the World Treaty for Mining, this place will come down, the Antarctic Treaty. And in 2049, they have to renew the treaty. Now, if we miss the boat and nations are greedy and they want to go and mine this place, we are sunk. Because obviously, sunk literally because the water levels will go up. There's microclimate issues already happening. So we also took a pledge. After this, we had 32 travelers, and all of us took the Antarctic ice, and we took a pledge that we will do whatever we can to spread the message of the Antarctic, not only in civil society, but lobby with the governments. And we had a lawyer on board, and he has given his lawyer time for taking this idea forward that we must protect the Antarctic. And look at the sites like this. I mean, you would hate to lose that. And Luthra law offices have now come together. Many large tourism organizations are behind this movement now, and we hope. And Shackleton's nephew, actually, or cousin, he became our patron for this project, and we want to spread the word to say that each one of us need to be aware, and we need to make choices. And if we don't make the right choice, like is happening around the planet on climate change, we could. This slide was only put in to say, isn't he looking carefully and asking you, will my fate be sealed? Costa Rica was yet my last expedition, or last few expeditions, where it's another beautiful country to study ecotourism practices and some fabulous river rafting possibilities. And we also do what is called, carbon offsetting through tree planting for events. And we took part in the world event of the Adventure Travel Summit, and this is where the tree plantation was done. In fact, now we want to do, after having been recognized by a few awards and partnering with the WWF or doing humanitarian trips and voluntary trips and sitting on the UIA, etc., we want to make sure that these kind of things don't happen, because this is a reality in the Himalaya even now, and this is disgusting. This is the kind of vernacular architecture. I'm sure you have some beautiful examples in Nepal that I've seen. In fact, I'm living at a place before I moved to the terraces at Nepali Ghar, which I mentioned. And I think they've blended a little bit of a reflection of that architecture. I have a battle going on with my government in a friendly way to tell them that all the airports that we are making today in India, they are cookie cutter airports. You could land in Dehradun or you could land in Madurai. They're all plastic and glass. You don't know where the hell you've landed. That is not the way to go. The point of entry needs to give you an idea where you've landed, So it's simple things like this. So therefore, hotels, lodges, as we develop, it's very important. We're also studying man and animal conflicts in our wildlife area. We're trying to see how we can get away from elephant riding completely from a tourism point of view and allow elephant riding only for patrolling at the moment. And right now, because the way of taming a wild elephant is so cruel, that I think it's only a matter of time that a lot of the companies globally will not allow you to have elephant riding to happen. So this is the newly morphed Ecotourism Society of India, has now become the Responsible Society of India. We have a MOU with the Government of India and the United Nations Environment Program. And these are literally the old tourism secretaries of India and Maharaja Gaj Singh and so on. We ally ourselves with a lot of organizations that are similar and give us intellectual input. And these are our brand ambassadors. Natikra might be known here in India, in Nepal. So this is the MOU I talked about. And this is the decade of ecosystem regeneration. And I believe it's a great time for our tourism industry really to take the step forward to see how you can use tourism as a tool to regenerate a lot of the ecosystems where we operate. So this is why we've now come up as a brand new initiative last year in India, which is now taken over by the government, because we analyzed that there are basically three pillars to sustainability. One is good government policy, and the other is good industry action. But the third missing link, which was always there, is the traveler himself or herself. So if the traveler can be educated in doing the right thing and making the right sort of, questions or the right demands, then I think it's very important. And one of the things is that suppose you're traveling in any country, you must carry a water bottle, because you cannot have single plastic use, mineral water bottles being used by tourists. So it's simple things, but very effective to do the garbage. So this is a voice from one of our Bollywood actors.
This pandemic phase, we can all start traveling again. We can go see the mountains, forests, lakes, beautiful historical monuments, picturesque backwaters, float down rivers, go to game reserves, all the wonderful places we want to go. But the world in which we are now traveling is different. In the same way that we protect ourselves, we need to protect our environment and the planet. Every time you go to a place, contribute to its economy. Buy local, respect its environment, and not leaving behind plastic and paper and all the rubbish that tourists normally leave. Leave the place better than when you found it. Be a responsible traveler.
So my hope is that we want to actually put this idea to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, that ideally speaking, we should have these traveler guidelines in every country. We should be sensitizing all the travelers that travel anywhere around the world, because it's applicable to everyone. And what we are trying to do is use this as a national campaign, which the Ministry of Tourism has agreed to take it on. And I want to show you the next video. This is all done gratis. Kabir Bedi is from my college, old buddy. So I said, look, we need a national message. And we've got a lot of good voices. And I just wanted to show you that clip, that perhaps we could do the same in Nepal, because we need our part of the world, whether it's Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, to at least come together on some aspects where the world sees us as a responsible destination, as a sustainable tourism destination. And that'd be great fun. So let's have a look at the other one, which talks of the same thing but different faces.
My name is Rakesh Mathur. I'm the founding member and current president of the Responsible Tourism Society of India. I'm extremely glad and privileged and honored that on World Tourism Day, we are launching the Responsible Traveler campaign. My name is Arjun Mathur.
Hi, I'm Kabir Bedi.
आज मैं रिस्पॉन्सिबल टूरिज्म सोसाइटी ऑफ इंडिया की तरफ से आपसे बात कर रही हूँ. My name is Lucky Khanna.
As head of the UN Environment Program in India, I would like to say that we will not only support the Responsible Traveler campaign, but we will also contribute to transforming tourism in India.
My name is Mandip Singh Soin, and I'm the founding president of the Responsible Tourism Society of India.
This is Deep Kalra from Nepal.
I'm delighted to be part of Responsible Tourism.
Hi, I'm Patu Keswani.
My name is Deepak Deva.
Don't be a bad man like me. Be a responsible tourist.
Hi everyone, I'm Lakshmi Sharma.
हेलो नमस्कार आदाब मैं अंतर अजीज और आपसे बात करने आया हूँ रिस्पांसिबल टूरिज्म के बारे में.
I am Sujin Banerjee, ex-tourism secretary government of India and honorary member of RTS for life.
Hello, I'm Charu Sharma.
My name is Anasha Garg. Arts is part of human process. This is Shobha Mohan.
Happy to be a torchbearer for the Responsible Tourism Society of India.
Rohit Kohli.
Hello, I am Anuradha, and we've come together to join the movement of being a responsible traveler.
Hi, my name is Smriti, and I'm a solo woman travel blogger.
Hello, my name is Panchi. My name is P.D. Rai.
My name is Bitu Sehgal, and I totally, absolutely support the idea of tourism being used as a conservation tool. Let's do this. Let's work together. Tourism can bind the world.
I'm Abhijit Das. I'm a responsible traveler.
Hello, I'm Mandip Singh. As a fellow traveler, I'm delighted to be a champion for responsible travel. If you wish to know more and join this movement, follow the links given and make this movement global by following hashtag I'm a responsible traveler. Take a pledge today and be a proud responsible traveler. Thank you.
Right. Just the last few slides, if you'll survive that. Okay. So, basically what. Oh, right. Yeah. So this is one of my last trips. This is a river cruise on the Brahmaputra, which is quite fun. We also did an experimental tree planting by everyone post the journey by measuring the carbon footprint and then deciding how many trees we want to plant to do the carbon offset. And this is another opportunity for tourism providers to do this and work with local communities or NGOs who can actually look after the trees in their area. So they'll also earn a little bit, but you'll also do a carbon offsetting of trees that will actually survive in the future. And this was our last initiative literally 2-3 weeks ago, and I thought it'd be pertinent to share it here. We called the CEOs of tourism, what we called it the CEOs Forum, and we called tour operating companies and the hotel companies under the UN and the RTSOI and the Ministry of Tourism, and we got them to actually sign off 2 pledges and the life pledge of the Indian government to basically say that they will do what they can in their area, because we believe that if it starts top down, then it works very well, and then things are much easier. So this is the last initiative, and this is the kind of pledge that they've all signed, that I will do whatever I can to transmit the responsible traveler guideline. So we're working on some very simple ideas, like when you check into the hotel, they'll give you the responsible traveler guideline, on your phone. Or we are now telling the government that when you have a visa application, and if it's an e-visa, you put the responsible traveler guideline ka ek line, that I will abide by these lines, and put a tick mark. Now, if you don't put a tick mark, your visa application doesn't move. That's the kind of pressure we need to put in to make sure that it's all done. So now we are trying to make it as a movement, because that's what is needed, and that's Anita and me, and we dedicate our journeys always to people who choose to tread lightly. And as Ibn Battuta says, it traveling leaves you speechless and then turns you into a storyteller. Thank you very much indeed.